The wind never stopped in Mercy's Bend. It came from the east at dawn, carrying dust and the smell of sage, then shifted west by noon, hot and dry as old bones. Luke Morgan had learned to read that wind like scripture, when it would bring rain, when it would bring trouble, when it would bring nothing at all but more emptiness to fill the spaces between the mesas. His ranch sat 3 miles outside town, a collection of weather-beaten buildings that looked like they'd grown from the red earth itself. The main house leaned slightly to the north, its boards silvered by sun and time. Luke had stopped noticing the lean years ago, same as he'd stopped noticing the way his own shoulders curved forward, carrying weight that had nothing to do with the sacks of grain he hauled from town. On this particular morning in late September, Luke stood at his fence line watching the horizon. The Sangre de Cristo Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks already touched with early snow. Between here and there stretched miles of nothing, creosote bush, rabbit brush, and the occasional juniper twisted into shapes that looked like old men praying. He'd been up since before dawn. Same as always. Sleep came hard these days, chased away by dreams that smelled of gunpowder and burning canvas. 3 years now since that night, and still the dreams came regular as clockwork. He pressed his palm against the fence post, feeling the rough wood bite into his skin, using the pain to anchor himself to the present. The sound of wagon wheels on the hard-packed road made him turn. Supply run from Flagstaff, probably. The weekly stage that brought mail, goods, and occasionally, new faces to Mercy's Bend. Luke watched until the dust cloud passed, then headed back to the house. He had fences to mend on the south pasture, and solitude suited him fine. Town was busy when he rode in that afternoon. His supplies had dwindled to nothing but coffee and hardtack, and a man could only live on memories and guilt for so long before his body demanded sustenance. Luke tied his horse outside Morrison's general store, keeping his hat low over his eyes. "Afternoon." "Luke," old Morrison called from behind the counter. The storekeeper's voice held that careful neutrality folks used when they weren't sure if they should be friendly or not. "Got that tobacco you favor? Come in on today's stage." Luke nodded, not trusting his voice. He'd spoken maybe 50 words in the past week, and his throat felt rusty as an old gate. He gathered his supplies methodically. Flour, salt pork, coffee, beans. The familiar routine of survival. "New folks in town," Morrison continued, hungry for any excuse to talk. "Widow woman and her boy. Come from Colorado way. I heard she's taken work at Martha Jenkins's boarding house." Luke's hand paused over a tin of peaches. A luxury he couldn't afford, but Sarah had loved peaches. He put the tin back. "Shame about Charlie Dawson," Morrison went on. "Mining accident, they say. Left her with nothing but the clothes on her back and a boy to raise." The name meant nothing to Luke, but he understood the weight of loss. He paid for his goods and left without comment, stepping out into the blazing afternoon sun. That's when he saw her. She was trying to fix the front step of Jenkins's boarding house, her dark dress dusty at the knees where she knelt. A strand of auburn hair had escaped from her bonnet, catching the light like copper wire. Her movements were determined but inexpert, the hammer awkward in her grip. Luke found himself slowing, then stopping entirely. Something about the set of her shoulders, the stubborn way she attacked the broken board, reminded him of... No, he wouldn't think about that. The woman looked up, perhaps sensing his gaze. Green eyes met his across the dusty street, and for a moment, the world narrowed to just that connection. There was no fear in her look, just a direct assessment that made him feel exposed despite the shadow of his hat brim. Then her son appeared, couldn't be more than 6 or 7, and tugged at her sleeve. She broke the gaze, turning to the boy with a gentle smile that transformed her face. Luke moved on, his boots heavy on the boardwalk. He was loading his supplies into saddlebags when he heard footsteps behind him, light but purposeful. "Excuse me, sir." Luke turned slowly. The woman stood there, hammer still in hand, that stubborn chin lifted. "I don't mean to trouble you, but I noticed you watching. I don't suppose you know anything about carpentry?" Her voice carried a hint of somewhere east. Not full Eastern, but educated. I'm afraid I'm making a mess of this step, and Mrs. Jenkins will have my hide if I don't fix it proper. Luke looked at her, then at the boarding house, then back to his horse. He should say no, should mount up and ride back to his empty house and his empty life. That's what he'd done for 3 years now. Avoided entanglements, connections, anything that might require him to be more than a ghost drifting through days. But something in her eyes, not pleading, just matter-of-fact about needing help, made him nod. "Got some tools in my saddlebags," he heard himself say, voice rough from disuse. Her smile was quick and genuine. "I'm Anna Dawson. My boy there is Samuel." Luke touched his hat brim but didn't offer his name. She didn't push, just led him back to the boarding house. The repair was simple enough. The board was split, not broken, and needed replacing. Luke worked in silence while Anna held the new board steady. Her presence beside him was oddly comfortable, like she understood the value of quiet. "You from around here?" she asked finally, as he hammered the last nail home. "Got a place outside town. Ranch? Of sorts." She didn't press for more, and he was grateful. When he tested the step with his boot, it held firm. "Thank you, Mr. Luke Morgan," he said, surprising himself. "Well, Mr. Morgan, I'm obliged. What do I owe you?" "Nothing." He gathered his tools, already regretting the interaction. People would talk. They always did. "Then at least let me pour you some coffee. Mrs. Jenkins keeps a pot on all day." Luke shook his head, backing away. Best be getting back. He was almost to his horse when her voice stopped him again. "Mr. Morgan, thank you for taking the time." He didn't turn around, just lifted a hand in acknowledgement and mounted up. As he rode out of town, he could feel her watching, that direct green gaze following him until he disappeared into the heat shimmer rising from the desert floor. That night, Luke sat on his porch watching the stars emerge. Venus came first, bright in the western sky, followed by the scattered diamonds of the Milky Way. The wind had died to a whisper, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its pack. He thought about green eyes and copper hair, about the weight of a hammer in work-worn hands. Dangerous thoughts for a man with his particular ghosts. He went inside and poured 3 fingers of whiskey, drinking it down like medicine. But later, lying in his narrow bed, he found himself wondering what had brought Anna Dawson to Mercy's Bend. What kind of man Charlie Dawson had been, to leave a woman like that to fix broken steps in a boarding house. What kind of courage it took to start over in a place where the wind never stopped blowing and the dust settled in your soul thick as guilt. Miles away, in the shadows of the mesa, another man watched the stars. Taza had made camp in a hidden canyon, the same place his people had sheltered for generations before soldiers and settlers had pushed them from their lands. The fire was small, barely enough to warm his hands, but enough to think by. He'd been watching Luke Morgan for 2 weeks now, learning his patterns, his solitude, the way he moved through the world like a man carrying invisible chains. Taza understood that weight. He carried his own, the memory of flames and screaming, of his wife's eyes going dark as her blood soaked into the earth. 3 years, 3 years of wandering, of trying to find peace in the old ways, of failing. The others who'd survived that night had found new lives with other bands or on the reservation. But Taza couldn't let go. Not yet. He'd come back for justice, or maybe just for answers. Why had they attacked a peaceful camp? Why had women and children died for crimes they hadn't committed? The questions burned in him like the embers of his small fire. Tomorrow, maybe the day after, he would approach Luke Morgan. He would demand, what? Money? Truth? Some acknowledgement of what had been taken. Taza pulled his blanket tighter and watched a shooting star arc across the sky. His grandmother would have called it a sign, but of what? He couldn't say. In the distance, a coyote answered the call from earlier, and soon the night filled with their wild music. Change was coming to Mercy's Bend. Taza could feel it in the wind, see it in the stars, taste it in the smoke of his dying fire. That woman at the boarding house, He'd seen her too, seen the way Luke Morgan had looked at her. Such things had a way of unraveling carefully woven plans. But for tonight, Taza would wait. Patience was perhaps the only thing he had left from his old life, and he would use it. The desert had taught him that much. Sometimes the best hunter was the one who knew when to be still. In Mercy's Bend, the saloon was closing up, Cowboy stumbling out into the darkness. At the boarding house, Anna Dawson tucked her son into bed and sat by the window, mending a torn shirt by lamplight. At his ranch, Luke Morgan lay wakeful, chasing sleep that wouldn't come, and the wind picked up again, bringing the smell of rain from somewhere far off. A promise or a threat, depending on which way a man was inclined to read the signs. The meeting place was an old box canyon 20 miles north of Mercy's Bend, where ancient waters had carved deep grooves into red rock. Luke arrived first, as Taza had known he would. The Apache watched from a ridge above, studying the way the cowboy moved, stiff, wary, hand never far from the Colt on his hip. When Taza finally showed himself, descending the rocky trail with deliberate noise, Luke's whole body tensed like a drawn bowstring. "You came," Taza said in English worn smooth by disuse. "Your message didn't leave much choice." Luke's voice was steady, but Taza could see the pulse jumping in his throat. They stood 20 feet apart, two men caught in the web of a night neither could forget. Taza had changed in 3 years, his hair longer, streaked with premature gray, his face carved deeper by sun and sorrow, but his eyes remained sharp as obsidian. "You know why I'm here." Luke nodded slowly. "Figured you'd come eventually." 3 years I waited. 3 years I tried to follow the old ways, to let the dead rest." Taza's jaw tightened. "But they don't rest. They call out from the earth where their blood's soaked in." "What do you want?" The question came out harsh, but Taza heard the desperation underneath. "Justice." Taza let the word hang between them like smoke. "But justice is complicated, isn't it? The army says it was justified. A raid on hostile Indians. Your town celebrates it as keeping the peace." Luke's face twisted. "Nobody celebrates." "No?" Taza stepped closer. "Then why does Captain Harris still wear his uniform with pride? Why does Mayor Thornton speak of that night as unfortunate but necessary? Why do you still walk free?" "You think I feel free?" The words exploded from Luke like they'd been building pressure for years. "You think a single day passes that I don't—" He cut himself off, turning away. Taza studied him for a long moment. "No, I see the chains you wear, but chains don't bring back the dead. Then what will?" "Money." The word tasted bitter in Taza's mouth, but practical. "You will pay. Not for silence. I won't be silent forever, but for time. Time to gather proof, testimonies, time to make them listen." Luke faced him again. "How much?" $50 a month. It was a fortune for a struggling rancher. And both men knew it. Luke's ranch barely broke even in good years. "I can manage 30. Taza considered. 40. Or I go to the newspaper tomorrow." Luke nodded, defeat in every line of his body. He pulled a leather pouch from his jacket. "First payment." As Taza took the money, their eyes met. For a moment, the Apache saw not the enemy who'd ridden with the raiders, but a man drowning in the same dark water that threatened to pull Taza under. "There's something else," Luke said quietly. "That night, my wife—" "I know." Taza's voice gentled slightly. "I saw her fall. Wrong place, wrong time. The bullets don't ask names." Luke's face crumpled briefly before he mastered it. "She was trying to stop it, trying to get to your camp to warn—" He shook his head. "Doesn't matter now. Everything matters." Taza said, "That's why we're here." They parted without farewell, Luke mounting his horse and riding south while Taza melted back into the rocky terrain. Neither noticed the figure huddled behind a cluster of boulders 50 yards away. Anna Dawson pressed herself against the rocks, heart hammering. She'd been gathering kindling for the boarding house stove, venturing farther than usual in search of good wood. The voices had carried clearly in the still air of the canyon. $40 a month. Raiders. That night, your wife. She waited until both men were long gone before emerging from her hiding spot, mind reeling. Luke Morgan, the quiet rancher who'd fixed her step with gentle hands. Involved in some past violence with the Apache, his wife dead in the crossfire. Anna gathered her scattered kindling with shaking fingers. She should have announced herself when she heard voices, should have turned back, but something had held her frozen. Perhaps the raw pain in Luke's voice, or the controlled fury in the Apache man's. The ride back to town felt longer than usual. Every shadow might hide watching eyes. Every sound made her mare skip nervously. By the time she reached the boarding house, dusk was falling and Samuel was waiting on the porch. "Mama, you're late, Mrs." Jenkins said if you weren't back by dark, she'd send Mr. Morrison looking. Anna forced a smile, ruffling his hair. "Just lost track of time. Sweetheart, let's get this wood inside." But all through the evening meal, Mrs. Jenkins's tough beef and boiled potatoes, Anna's mind churned. She served the boarders mechanically, poured coffee, cleared plates, all while seeing Luke's haunted face in her mind's eye. Later, after Samuel was asleep, Anna sat by her window looking out at the dark street. Mercy's Bend slumbered peacefully, but now she knew what violence lurked beneath its quiet surface. She'd come here to escape her own past, to build something new for her son. Now she'd stumbled into someone else's tragedy. She thought of Luke's hands, steady and sure on the hammer, the way he'd worked in comfortable silence. How different from that anguished voice in the canyon. A movement in the street below caught her eye, a figure on horseback, moving slowly through the shadows. As he passed beneath her window, the moon caught his profile. Luke, without conscious decision. Anna found herself slipping downstairs and out the back door. He was tying his horse at the saloon's hitching post, and she could see the slump of his shoulders even from across the street. "Mr. Morgan?" He spun, hand dropping to his gun before recognizing her. "Mrs. Dawson, you shouldn't be out alone after dark." "Neither should you, from the look of things." He studied her face in the moonlight. "Can't sleep. Thought a whiskey might help." "In my experience, whiskey only makes the sleepless nights worse." She pulled her shawl tighter. "I've got coffee on. Mrs. Jenkins won't mind if we use the kitchen." "I don't think—" "Please." The word came out more forceful than intended. I could use the company, too." Something in her tone made him look at her more sharply, but he nodded. They walked back to the boarding house in silence, Luke leading his horse. The kitchen was warm and quiet, embers still glowing in the stove. Anna added wood and set the coffee pot on while Luke sat awkwardly at the scarred wooden table. "You were out late gathering kindling," he said finally, her hand stilled on the coffee pot. "Yes." "North of town?" She met his eyes. "Yes." Understanding dawned on his face, followed quickly by resignation. "How much did you hear?" "Enough." Anna poured 2 cups with steady hands, though her heart raced. "You don't owe me explanations, Mr. Morgan." "Don't I?" His laugh was bitter. "You let me into your place of work, near your boy. You should know what kind of man— I know what kind of man fixed my step without asking for payment. What kind of man works his ranch alone rather than bring his troubles to town. You don't understand." Luke's hands clenched around the coffee cup. "That night, we thought we were tracking raiders. Horses had been stolen, a settler family attacked. The trail led to a camp in Skeleton Wash." Anna waited, letting the silence draw out his words. "It was nearly dawn when we hit them. Chaos in the dark, gunfire, screaming. I saw women and children and tried to stop it, but—" His voice broke. "Sarah had followed us, stubborn, worried. She rode right into the middle of it, trying to stop the killing. A bullet meant for someone else." "From whose gun?" Anna asked gently. Luke's face was answer enough. "Oh," she breathed. "The Apache man. Taza. His family died that night too. His pregnant wife, his sister, others. All for horses that weren't even there. Bad intelligence. They said later, mistaken identity." Luke laughed bitterly. "As if that mattered to the dead." Anna reached across the table, covering his clenched fist with her palm. He jerked like he'd been burned but didn't pull away. So now he wants justice, and money to find it. And I'll pay because what else can I do? It won't bring anyone back, but maybe... He trailed off. Maybe it's penance. Anna finished. He looked at her with surprise. Yes. They sat in silence, her hand still on his, while the coffee cooled between them. Finally, Anna spoke again. My husband didn't die in a mining accident. Luke's eyes sharpened, but he waited. He was a drunk and a gambler. Got into debt with the wrong people in Denver. One night he came home bloodied, said we had to leave immediately. We made it as far as Pueblo before they caught up. Her voice was steady. Matter of fact. They beat him to death in an alley while Samuel and I hid in a hotel room. I heard it all. Did nothing. You protected your son. Yes, but I still hear it. Still wonder if I could have... She shook her head. We all carry our dead. Mr. Morgan. The question is whether we let them bury us too. Luke turned his hand palm up, fingers closing gently around hers. You're stronger than you look. Mrs. Dawson. Anna, she corrected. And you're not as lost as you think. Luke. A door creaked somewhere upstairs, breaking the moment. Anna pulled her hand back, suddenly aware of the impropriety of sitting alone with a man in the midnight kitchen. I should go, Luke said, standing. Yes. At the door. He paused. Anna, what I told you, the town doesn't know. They suspect, but your secret is safe. She met his eyes steadily, though I wonder if keeping it is doing you any favors. He touched his hat brim and disappeared into the night. Anna stood at the door, watching until horse and rider were swallowed by darkness. Then she went upstairs to check on Samuel, stopping at his doorway to watch him sleep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The boarding house to run, meals to cook, her son to raise in this hard land. And now this. Luke's tragedy tangled with the Apache man's quest for justice, and her own heart already more involved than was wise. But tonight, she'd offered comfort to a suffering man and received understanding in return. In a place like Mercy's Bend, where the wind scoured everything down to bare truth, perhaps that was enough. Outside, that eternal wind picked up again, rattling windows and singing through the eaves. It carried the scent of coming rain and something else, change, inevitable as sunrise, unstoppable as the seasons turning. Anna closed her eyes and listened to its wild song, wondering what tomorrow would bring to their desert crossroads where 3 lives had become inextricably bound by secrets, sorrow, and the faint, dangerous hope of redemption. The news came with the morning stage from Fort Grant. 3 ranches hid in as many nights, cattle stolen, a barn burned. The driver, a grizzled man named Hutchins, stood in front of Morrison's store addressing a growing crowd. Apache raiders, sure as sin, he declared, spitting tobacco juice into the dust. Saw the smoke myself from Miller's place. Army's sending a patrol, but you know how that goes. Luke stood at the back of the crowd, jaw tight. Beside him, Mayor Thornton was already pontificating about civilian protection, his voice carrying that politician's mix of authority and alarm. We've dealt with this before. Gentlemen, perhaps it's time to organize another militia patrol. Damn right, someone called out. Can't let them savages think they can come and go as they please. Luke felt his stomach turn. The same words, the same fear and anger that had led to Skeleton Wash. He started to edge away when a hand caught his arm. Morgan. Thornton's pale eyes were sharp. You rode with us before. We could use your experience. No. Now. See here. I said no. Luke's voice carried enough edge that men stepped back. I've got my own place to watch. He pushed through the crowd, ignoring the mutters that followed. At the boarding house, Anna was sweeping the porch while Samuel played with a wooden horse in the dirt. She looked up as he approached, reading something in his face. What is it? Trouble brewing. Raiders hit some ranches north of here. Town's getting stirred up. Anna's grip tightened on the broom. Indians? That's what they're saying. Luke glanced around, lowered his voice. You might want to stay close to town for a while. Keep the boy near. Luke. She stopped, color rising in her cheeks at using his given name in daylight. Will you be all right? I can take care of myself. He touched his hat brim, started to go, then turned back. Anna, if anyone asks about strangers you might have seen, I've seen nothing unusual, she said firmly. Their eyes held for a moment before he nodded and strode away. That afternoon, Taza appeared at the boarding house like a shadow. Anna was alone in the kitchen, kneading bread, when she sensed a presence and turned to find him standing in the doorway. Her heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. Can I help you? Water, he said simply. If you would be kind. She filled a cup from the pitcher, handed it over. He drank slowly, dark eyes studying her over the rim. You are the woman from the canyon. It wasn't a question. Anna lifted her chin. Yes. You heard things not meant for your ears. Many things happen that aren't meant to. That doesn't make them less real. A ghost of something, approval, crossed his weathered face. Luke Morgan. He matters to you. He's been kind to me and my son. Kindness. Taza set down the cup carefully. An interesting word. Was he kind 3 years ago? Were you kind to those ranches that were raided? His face hardened. I raid nothing. Others. Younger men with hotter blood. They take what they think is owed. I seek only justice through law, through truth. Then you're a better person than most. They stood measuring each other across the kitchen. Finally, Taza spoke again. There will be violence coming. Men like your mayor. They want blood. Any Apache blood will do. Why tell me? Because Luke Morgan stands between two fires. And because, he paused, seeming to choose words carefully. Because a woman who offers water without fear might speak wisdom without prejudice. The front door slammed. Samuel's voice called out, Mama, there's soldiers coming. Taza was gone before Anna could blink, vanishing through the back door like smoke. She hurried to the front room where Samuel pressed his nose against the window. A cavalry unit was indeed riding down Main Street, dust billowing from their horses' hooves. Captain Harris led them, his uniform crisp despite the heat, his face set in lines of determined authority. Samuel, go upstairs and practice your letters. But Mama, now, please. As her son reluctantly climbed the stairs, Anna stepped onto the porch. Other townspeople were emerging, drawn by the spectacle of military arrival. She saw Luke across the street, standing in the shadow of the livery stable. Captain Harris dismounted in front of the mayor's office, and Thornton emerged to greet him with obvious relief. Their voices carried in the still air. Captain, thank God. We've been expecting another attack any night. We've tracked a small band moving south. Harris replied. Likely the same group that's been hitting the ranches. We'll make camp outside town. Patrol the area. Any chance of catching them? Harris's smile was cold. Indians always make mistakes eventually. We'll be ready. Luke turned away from the scene, and his path brought him past the boarding house. He paused at Anna's gate. Pack some things, he said quietly. You and the boy. Keep them ready. You think it's that serious? I think when soldiers and scared townspeople mix with Apache raiders, innocent people get caught in the middle. His eyes were haunted. It's happened before. That evening, the town felt electric with tension. The saloon was packed, voices loud with bravado and whiskey. Anna served supper to her boarders, noting how conversations centered on Indian attacks, on retribution, on the need for decisive action. One of the boarders, a traveling merchant named Gillespie, held forth at length. In California, we knew how to handle the Indian problem. Clear them out, move them on. Only way to have peace. Peace. Anna set down his coffee cup harder than necessary. Is that what you call it? Gillespie flushed. Now see here. Mrs. Dawson. Excuse me, more coffee to brew. In the kitchen, she gripped the counter, trying to calm her shaking hands. Through the window, she could see campfires where the soldiers had made camp at the town's edge. How many such fires had burned the night Sarah Morgan died? How many women had looked out windows, worrying, while men made plans for violence? A soft knock at the back door made her jump. She opened it to find Luke, hat in hand. "Didn't mean to startle you. I wanted to make sure you were all right." "Come in," she said, stepping aside. "Though people will talk, let 'em." He entered, filling the kitchen with his presence. "Anna, I need to say something. What's coming? It won't be like before. I won't be part of it. But that might not matter if..." "If what?" He struggled for words. "If Taza gets caught up in it. If they find out about our arrangement, the whole town could turn ugly. Then we'll face it." She moved closer, looking up at him. "Luke, I'm not afraid. You should be. I've been afraid before. It didn't help then. Won't help now." She reached up, touched his cheek. "Whatever happens, you're not alone this time." He caught her hand, pressed it against his face, eyes closing. "Anna!" The kitchen door burst open. Mrs. Jenkins stood there, face flushed with outrage. "Mrs. Dawson, what is the meaning of..." Anna stepped back but kept her composure. "Mr. Morgan was just checking on our safety. Mrs. Jenkins, with the troubles..." "I know exactly what kind of trouble young widows can find." The older woman's eyes were hard. "Mr. Morgan, I'll thank you to leave. Mrs. Dawson, we'll discuss this in the morning." Luke left without a word, but his eyes found Anna's one last time. When he was gone, Mrs. Jenkins rounded on her. "I run a respectable establishment. I won't have carrying on under my roof." There was no carrying on. "I have eyes, girl, and this town has a long memory. You'd do well to remember that some men bring nothing but sorrow to any woman fool enough to care for them." She swept out, leaving Anna alone in the kitchen. Outside, the wind was picking up again, carrying the smell of dust and coming storm. Anna cleaned up mechanically, her mind churning. Mrs. Jenkins was right. Of course, getting involved with Luke was foolish, dangerous, but her heart had already made its choice. Consequences be damned. Upstairs, she checked on Samuel, fast asleep despite the tension gripping the town. She kissed his forehead, then went to her window. Lightning flickered on the horizon, illuminating the mountains in brief. Stark flashes. Somewhere out there, Taza and his people were moving through the darkness, hunted and hunting. In town, soldiers cleaned their rifles and made plans. And 3 miles away, she knew Luke was sitting on his porch, watching the same storm approach. The first drops of rain began to fall, fat and heavy with promise. Anna pressed her palm against the cool glass of the window. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. But tonight, in the space between lightning and thunder, she allowed herself to imagine a different future, one where the past could be laid to rest, where justice and mercy might find balance, where a lonely rancher and a determined widow might build something new from the ashes of old sorrow. Thunder crashed overhead, and the storm broke in earnest. Anna smiled grimly. In Mercy's Bend, even hope came with wind and lightning. But then, she was learning that anything worth having in this hard land came at a price. The question was whether they'd all survive to pay it. The rain fell harder, drumming on the roof like war drums or celebration, depending on how you chose to hear it. Anna chose to hear possibility, even as the darkness pressed close and the town held its breath for whatever morning would bring. The second meeting between Luke and Taza took place at dawn, in the same canyon where red rocks held secrets like cupped hands. This time, Luke arrived to find Taza already waiting, his face drawn with exhaustion. "You look like hell," Luke said. "The soldiers are thorough." Taza's voice was hoarse. "They've pushed the young warriors south, but some stayed behind, hidden, angry. That's not your doing. No, I came here seeking justice. My presence stirred old wounds." Taza studied Luke with those penetrating eyes. "Now blood may flow again." Luke pulled out the leather pouch. "Heavier this month. Take this and go. Leave the territory until things calm down." "Running." Taza weighed the pouch without opening it. Is that what you'd do? I've been running for 3 years without taking a step off my land. Yes? Taza's agreement was soft. I've seen your prison. Bars made of guilt, locks of memory. They stood in silence while the early light painted the canyon walls gold and crimson. Finally, Taza spoke again. I need more than money now. I need help. Luke's hand dropped instinctively to his gun. What kind of help? Documents, military records from that night. Captain Harris keeps them in his office. They would prove the attack was based on false information, that the dead were innocents. You're asking me to steal from the army? I'm asking you to choose between the easy lie and the hard truth. Luke felt the familiar weight settling on his chest. Even if I could get them, what then? You think papers will change hearts that are already set? Perhaps not, but truth has its own power. Your wife believed that, didn't she? The words hit like a physical blow. Luke turned away, struggling for control. When he spoke again, his voice was rough. I'll think about it. Don't think too long. The young warriors grow restless, and your Captain Harris speaks of teaching lessons. Taza paused. There's something else. The woman at the boarding house. Leave her out of this. She's already in it. I've seen how you look at her, how she looks at you. Taza's expression softened slightly. Be careful. Luke Morgan. Love makes men do foolish things. Speaking from experience, my wife's name was Ayana. It means eternal blossom. Taza's voice carried infinite sadness. She was pregnant with our first child. She died trying to shield her sister's baby. The two men stood facing each other, bound by losses that mirrored like reflections in dark water. I'll see what I can do about the documents, Luke heard himself say. Taza nodded and melted back into the landscape. Luke mounted his horse and rode toward town. His mind churning. He was crossing a line. He knew, but perhaps he'd crossed it 3 years ago and was only now admitting it. In town, he found chaos. Mrs. Jenkins stood on the boarding house porch, Anna's belongings piled at her feet. A small crowd had gathered, drawn by the spectacle. I won't have it, Mrs. Jenkins declared. This is a respectable establishment. Women who entertain men at all hours can find lodging elsewhere. Anna stood straight-backed on the steps, Samuel clutching her skirts. Her face was pale but composed. Mrs. Jenkins, please, I've explained. I know what I saw, and what others have seen. You riding out alone, coming back with your dress dusty, meeting with strangers. The older woman's face was triumphant with righteous indignation. We know your type. Luke pushed through the crowd. That's enough. Mrs. Jenkins rounded on him. Oh, here he is. Come to collect your... I said enough. Luke's voice carried the dangerous quiet that had cleared more than one saloon. Mrs. Dawson has done nothing improper. If you're throwing her out based on malicious gossip, that's your choice, but you'll speak respectfully. Mayor Thornton emerged from the gathering crowd. Now, Morgan, no need for threats. I'm sure we can settle this civilly. Nothing to settle. Mrs. Jenkins sniffed. She goes today. Luke looked at Anna, saw the fear she was trying to hide, saw Samuel's confusion, made a decision that felt inevitable as gravity. She'll come to my place. The crowd's murmur rose like disturbed bees. Anna's eyes widened. Luke, no, people will talk regardless. He began gathering her belongings. I've got a spare room. You and the boy will be safe. This is highly improper, Thornton protested. A single woman, living with a man who'll protect her and her son from hypocrites and gossips? Luke straightened, meeting the mayor's eyes. Yes, highly improper. He loaded Anna's few possessions into a borrowed wagon while the crowd watched. Anna climbed up, lifting Samuel beside her, her chin high despite the whispers following them down the street. They rode in silence until they were clear of town. Then Anna spoke, voice tight. You shouldn't have done that. Your reputation... My reputation? Luke laughed bitterly. Anna, my reputation died 3 years ago with my wife. What's left isn't worth protecting. but giving people more reason to talk. To suspect, let them suspect. He glanced at her. Though I should ask, are you all right with this? I didn't give you much choice back there. She was quiet for a moment. Samuel and I have slept in worse places than a spare room, and I trust you. Luke, perhaps that makes me foolish, but it makes you the bravest woman I've known since— He stopped. Since Sarah? He nodded, throat tight. They reached the ranch as the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly. Luke helped them unload, showed them to the small room off the kitchen. It was clean but sparse. A narrow bed, a washstand, hooks on the wall for clothes. It's not much, he began. It's perfect. Anna set down her bundle, turned to face him. Luke, why? Really why? He stood in the doorway, hat in hands, struggling for words. Because I'm tired of watching from the edges while wrong things happen. Because you don't deserve to suffer for showing me kindness. Because— He met her eyes. Because for the first time in 3 years, I want to protect something instead of just enduring. Anna crossed to him, reaching up to touch his face. This time, no one interrupted when he lowered his head and kissed her. It was gentle, tentative, tasting of possibility and sorrow in equal measure. Samuel's voice broke them apart. Mama, there's a horse outside. Through the window, they saw a rider approaching fast. Luke recognized the horse before the man. Jim Hutchins, the stage driver. Morgan, Hutchins called out before his mount had even stopped. Thank God you're here. All hell's broken loose in town. What happened? Soldiers caught some Apaches watering horses at Willow Creek. Shooting started. Nobody knows who fired first. 2 soldiers dead. 3 Indians. Captain Harris is forming up a militia, talking about sweeping the whole territory. Hutchins noticed Anna then, tipped his hat awkwardly. Ma'am, didn't know you were— Anyway, Morgan, Mayor wants every able-bodied man in town by sunset. I'm not coming. Hutchins blinked. But you're the best tracker we got. You know these hills better than— I said no. Harris won't like it. Neither will Thornton. Then they can come tell me themselves. Luke's tone ended the conversation. After Hutchins left, Luke stood staring out at the desert. Anna moved beside him. This is what you feared. Yeah, it'll be skeleton wash all over again. Shoot first, sort the bodies later. He turned to her urgently. I need to go to town, not for the militia, for something else. Will you be all right here? What are you planning? He hesitated, then told her about Taza's request for the documents. Her face went pale, but she nodded. Be careful. Bar the door. Don't let anyone in but me. As Luke saddled his horse, his mind raced. The cavalry office would be empty with Harris forming up the militia. If he could get those documents to Taza, maybe, what, stop the violence? Unlikely. But at least the truth would be preserved. Somewhere. Somehow. The sun was setting as he rode back toward Mercy's Bend, painting the sky the color of blood and flame. Behind him, Anna stood in the doorway, watching until he disappeared into the gathering darkness. Samuel tugged at her skirts. Is Mr. Luke in trouble? Mama? I don't know. Sweetheart? She closed the door, dropped the bar into place. But I think we all might be. In town, men gathered with rifles and torches, their faces hard with purpose and fear. Captain Harris addressed them from the steps of the mayor's office, his voice carrying promises of swift justice and permanent solutions. The crowd cheered, hungry for action, for simple answers to complex sorrows. And somewhere in the darkness between town and ranch, between past and future, Luke Morgan rode toward a choice that would shatter the fragile peace he'd built from the ruins of his life. The desert wind carried the scent of sage and coming violence, and the stars emerging overhead were cold and distant as the eyes of the dead. The storm hit just after midnight, turning the world white and howling. Luke had made it to the old prospector's cabin on Sawmill Ridge before the worst of it, but guilt drove him out into the blizzard at dawn. His horse struggled through drifts that reached its belly, and more than once, Luke thought they'd both freeze before reaching the summit. He'd fled town the night before without getting the documents. The militia had been everywhere, and Harris had posted guards at his office. Worse, he'd heard talk in the saloon. They'd captured Taza trying to reach his hidden camp. The Apache was locked in the town jail, awaiting justice once the storm passed. Now Luke climbed toward the cross marking Sarah's grave, needing to speak to her one last time before everything ended. The wooden marker was barely visible through the driving snow. He fell to his knees beside it, hands numb even through thick gloves. I failed, he said to the wind in the grave. Failed you, failed him, failed everyone. I couldn't even steal some papers to prove what we both know is true. The storm swallowed his words. He thought of Anna back at the ranch, probably worried sick. Thought of Taza in a cold cell. Thought of Sarah's face that last night, determined to stop the violence. I'm not brave like you were, he whispered. I'm just tired, so damn tired of carrying this. He pulled out his revolver, stared at it through the swirling snow. One shot, one moment of courage, and it would all be over. No more guilt, no more payments, no more seeing Sarah's ghost in every shadow. The metal was so cold it burned through his glove. He raised it to his temple, closed his eyes. Luke! The voice came faint through the storm. He turned, squinting through the white fury, and saw a figure struggling up the slope. Anna, wrapped in his old buffalo coat, leading her mare through the drifts. No, he breathed. No. Go back. She reached him as he struggled to his feet, her face raw from cold and wind. Without a word, she slapped him hard enough to knock him back into the snow. How dare you, she gasped, breath coming in clouds. How dare you leave me with nothing but a note? How dare you come up here to... She saw the gun still in his hand, and her fury transformed into something worse. Understanding. Oh, Luke, no. You shouldn't have followed. The storm. Damn the storm. She knelt beside him, pulled off her mittens to cup his frozen face. And damn you for thinking this was the answer. I can't save anyone. Anna, not Taza, not you, not even myself. I'm not asking you to save me. I'm asking you not to leave me. Her hands were warm against his cheeks, her green eyes fierce. Samuel already lost one father. Don't make him lose another. I'm not his... Aren't you? He talks about Mr. Luke constantly. How you showed him to fix the fence. How you let him help with the horses. Tears froze on her cheeks as fast as they fell. You gave us a home when no one else would. You think that debt only runs one way? Luke looked at her, this stubborn woman who'd followed him into a killing storm, and felt something crack inside his chest. I killed her, he said, the words ripping out of him. My bullet. I saw her fall and knew, and you've died every day since. When does it end? Luke, when do you stop punishing yourself for one terrible moment? When Taza gets justice. Taza chose his path. You're not responsible for saving him. She was shivering now, lips turning blue. We need to get to shelter. The prospector's cabin was 100 yards down the slope. Luke half carried Anna through the drifts, their horses following by instinct, inside. He built up the fire while she huddled under moldy blankets. How did you find me? The note said you were going to say goodbye. I knew where that meant. She watched him add wood to the flames. My first husband, after particularly bad nights, he'd visit his father's grave. Men think they're mysterious, but you're all predictable in your grief. Luke sat beside her, pulling her against him for warmth. She fit naturally into the curve of his body, as if she belonged there. I'm broken. Anna, some things can't be fixed. I'm not trying to fix you. I'm trying to love you, you stubborn fool. She turned in his arms to face him. Broken people can still choose to live, can still choose each other. The kiss was different from their first. Desperate, hungry, full of need and sorrow and fierce determination. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. Anna, I know what I'm doing, she said. I know who you are, what you've done. I choose you anyway. The storm raged outside, sealing them in a world of flickering firelight and shadow. They came together with the urgency of two people who'd walked too close to death, who understood that tomorrow was never guaranteed. It was comfort and claiming. healing and hurting, gentle and desperate by turns. Afterward, they lay entangled under the blankets, listening to the wind howl. Anna traced the scar on Luke's shoulder, an old bullet wound from his ranger days. "Tell me about her," she said softly. "Tell me about Sarah." Luke tensed, but her hand on his chest was steady. Grounding, slowly, he began to speak. About meeting Sarah at a church social, her laugh that filled rooms, her stubborn streak that matched his own, how she'd followed him west against her family's wishes, her garden that never quite took to desert soil, but bloomed anyway through sheer will. "She was pregnant," he said finally, just starting to show. "We'd been trying for 2 years. Anna's arms tightened around him. "I'm sorry. She would have liked you, would have admired your strength." They lay in silence while the fire burned low. Finally, Anna spoke again. "What do we do about Taza?" "I don't know. The storm might buy us time, but once it clears—" He trailed off. "We'll figure it out. Together." She propped herself up to look at him. "But you have to promise me something. No more mountains and storms. No more saying goodbye to ghosts." "Anna, promise me, Luke. Promise you'll try to live. Not just survive, live." He looked up at her, this woman who'd walked through a blizzard to save him from himself, and nodded slowly. "I promise." The storm began to ease near dawn. They dressed in comfortable silence, the intimacy of the night settling around them like armor against what was to come. As they prepared the horses, Anna caught his arm. "I meant what I said. All of it. I know." He pulled her close, rested his forehead against hers. "So did I." The ride back was slow, the horses picking their way through fresh drifts. The world was transformed, white and pristine, as if the storm had washed away all sins. But Luke knew better, somewhere below. Taza waited in a cell. The militia waited for clear weather. Violence waited, patient as a snake. They were almost to the ranch when they saw the smoke. Luke's blood ran cold. He spurred his horse forward, Anna close behind. The barn was ash and smoking timbers. The house still stood, but the door hung off its hinges. Luke dismounted at a run, gun drawn. "Samuel!" Anna's scream cut through the morning air as she rushed past him. They found the boy in the root cellar where he'd hidden, terrified but unharmed. Anna clutched him while Luke surveyed the damage. A message was scratched into the kitchen table. "Apache lovers get what's coming." "They came in the night," Samuel whispered. "Men with torches. I hid like you taught me. Mama." Luke felt the old rage building, but now it had focus. They'd threatened his... what? His family? The word felt strange, but right. "Pack what you can carry," he told Anna. "We're leaving." "Where will we go?" He thought of Taza in his cell, of documents that could prove innocence, of debts that demanded payment. "First to town, then maybe California, somewhere far from here." "But Taza—" "I'll do what I can, but not at the cost of you and Samuel." He gripped her shoulders. "I lost one family to this madness. I won't lose another." Anna searched his face, then nodded. They packed quickly. Clothes, food, what little money Luke had saved. As they prepared to leave, Anna paused at the door. No regrets. Luke looked at the ruins of his self-imposed exile, then at the woman and child who'd given him reason to rejoin the living. None that matter anymore. They rode out as the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the snow. Behind them, smoke still rose from the barn. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, possibly death, but for the first time in 3 years. Luke Morgan faced forward instead of back, and the weight on his shoulders felt less like chains and more like wings. The storm had passed, leaving the world changed, and in that change, fragile as new ice, lay the possibility of redemption. Luke's decision came in the pre-dawn darkness as they camped in a grove of cottonwoods. Anna woke to find him saddling his horse, moving with quiet purpose. "You're going back," she said. Not a question. I can't leave him to hang for crimes he didn't commit." Luke checked his rifle, his movements efficient. Take Samuel to Fort Benton. There's a missionary couple there, the Wheelers. They'll help you get to California." "No," he turned. "Anna, I said no." She stood, chin lifted in that stubborn way he'd come to love. "We stay together, or we go together." "It's too dangerous. The whole town's turned rabid. Then you'll need help." She was already rolling up their bedding. "Samuel can stay with the Wheelers while we do what needs doing." Luke wanted to argue, but he saw the futility in her eyes. This woman who'd walked through a blizzard for him wouldn't be left behind now. They reached Fort Benton by noon, found the Wheelers at their small mission. Martha Wheeler, a plump woman with kind eyes, took one look at them and ushered them inside. "Luke Morgan," she said. "I remember you from before. You brought us supplies that hard winter. I need a favor. Mrs. Wheeler." Luke explained briefly. Trouble in Mercy's Bend, needing someone to watch Samuel, Martha's husband Paul. A thin man with gentle hands. Nodded. "The boys welcome here. But Luke, we've heard rumors. Indian troubles. Vigilante justice brewing. That's why we're going back," Anna said firmly. "To stop it if we can." The Wheelers exchanged glances. "God go with you then," Martha said. "We'll pray for wisdom to prevail." Leaving Samuel was hard. The boy clung to Anna, understanding more than a child should. "You'll come back." "Always," Anna promised, kissing his forehead. "Be good for Mrs. Wheeler." They rode hard for Mercy's Bend, reaching the outskirts after dark. The town blazed with torches. Crowds milling in the streets. Luke pulled Anna into the shadows behind the shuttered blacksmith shop. "Listen," he said urgently. "Taza's in the jail. If I can get to Harris's office, get those documents. You'll need a distraction." Anna's mind was already working. "I could—" "No, you stay hidden. Promise me." She gripped his hand. "Be careful." Luke slipped through the shadows, using alleys he'd memorized during his isolated years. The military office was dark, but a guard lounged outside. Luke circled to the back, found a window loose in its frame. Inside, he searched frantically through Harris's desk. Orders, reports, supply lists. There, a folder marked "Skeleton Wash, Confidential." His hands shook as he opened it. The documents were damning. Reports of mistaken intelligence, civilian casualties. Recommendations for cover-up to maintain morale and prevent Apache sympathy. Sarah's name was listed among the dead, marked as unfortunate collateral damage. "I knew you'd come." Luke spun. Captain Harris stood in the doorway, pistol aimed steady. "That hero complex killed your wife, Morgan. Now it'll kill you too. These documents prove nothing that matters. Indians killed 2 of my men. That's all the truth anyone needs." Harris stepped closer. "Drop the papers." Luke calculated distances, angles. No good options? Then Anna's voice rang out from the street. "Fire! Fire at the livery stable!" Harris turned instinctively. Luke moved, grabbing the captain's gun hand, wrestling for control. They crashed into the desk, papers scattering. The gun went off, the sound enormous in the small space. Harris staggered back, clutching his shoulder. "You're done! Morgan! Guard!" Luke grabbed the documents and dove through the window as footsteps pounded closer. He hit the ground hard, rolled, came up running. Anna appeared from nowhere, grabbing his hand. "This way!" They ran through chaos. The livery stable was indeed burning. Anna had knocked over a lantern in the hay. Men rushed with buckets, shouting orders. In the confusion, Luke and Anna made it to the jail. The deputy on duty was young, nervous, overwhelmed by the night's events. Luke didn't give him time to think, just rushed him, knocked him cold with his gun butt. Anna grabbed the keys. Taza looked up from his cell, face bruised but eyes clear. "You came. Can't let you have all the glory," Luke said, unlocking the door. "We need to move, now." They slipped out the back as shouts erupted from the direction of Harris's office. Luke led them to where he'd hidden horses earlier. Old habit from ranger days. Always plan your escape. "Where?" Taza asked as they mounted. "There's an old mission at San Carlos. Father Miguel will give us sanctuary while we figure out next steps." They rode hard through the night, not stopping until dawn revealed they weren't being followed. Yet, at a creek, they watered the horses and took stock. "You risked everything," Taza said to Luke. "Why?" Luke handed him the documents. "Because the truth matters. Sarah believed that. Anna believes it." He looked at the woman who'd become his anchor. "I'm starting to believe it too." Taza read quickly, his face hardening. "This proves what we knew, but will anyone listen?" Father Miguel has connections. Newspapermen, federal marshals who aren't in Harris's pocket. Luke rubbed his tired eyes. "It's not justice, not yet, but it's a start." They reached the mission by midday. Father Miguel, ancient and weathered as desert stone, welcomed them without surprise. "Sanctuary is yours," he said simply, "though I fear it won't hold forever against men's hatred." That night, in the mission's simple guest room, Anna tended the cuts Luke had gotten diving through the window. Her hands were gentle, but her eyes worried. "What happens now?" "We get these documents to people who can use them. Then," he caught her hand, "then we disappear. California, Oregon, somewhere we can start fresh." "All of us?" Luke understood her meaning. He looked through the window to where Taza sat by the mission garden, staring at stars. "I'll make the offer." His choice to accept. Anna kissed him softly. "You're a good man. Luke Morgan." "I'm trying to be." Later, Luke found Taza alone. They sat in companionable silence before Luke spoke. "Come with us, when we leave." Taza's surprise was brief. "Why?" "Because neither of us can change what happened, but maybe together we can build something better. A white man, an Apache, a widow, and her son. What kind of family is that?" "The kind forged in truth instead of blood." Luke met his eyes. "Sarah would have wanted it. I think Ayanna would have too." Taza was quiet for a long time. "I'll think on it." A week later, Father Miguel's newspaper contacts arrived. They took statements, copied documents, asked hard questions. The story would run in papers from San Francisco to Washington, the priest assured them. Change would come slowly, but it would come. On their last night at the mission, Anna found Luke in the chapel. He knelt before the simple altar, head bowed, praying. It's been a while. He looked up at her, asking forgiveness, from Sarah, from God, from myself. Anna knelt beside him, took his hand. "I think forgiveness isn't something you ask for, it's something you accept." Through the window, sunset painted the desert in shades of gold and rose. Somewhere out there, Mercy's Bend was dealing with the aftermath of their actions. Captain Harris would recover but face investigation. The town would have to confront ugly truths. But here, in this moment of peace, Luke felt something he'd thought lost forever. Hope. Not the naive hope of youth, but the hard-won hope of those who've walked through darkness and found light on the other side. "Ready to leave tomorrow?" Anna asked. "Ready to live tomorrow," Luke corrected. "Whatever that brings." She smiled. And in that smile was their whole future. Uncertain, difficult, but theirs to shape. Together they rose and walked out into the desert evening, where Taza waited with news of his decision and the first stars were just beginning to shine. The past would always be with them, scars and all, but it no longer owned them. In choosing truth over comfort, love over isolation, they'd found the only redemption that mattered, the kind you build one day, one choice, one act of courage at a time. The makeshift courtroom was the abandoned barn on the Settlers Association grounds, hastily cleaned and filled with whatever chairs could be found. Word had spread through 3 counties that evidence would be presented about the skeleton wash incident, drawing a crowd that spilled out into the dusty yard. Judge Theodore Blackwood, brought in from Tucson at Father Miguel's request, was known for his fairness and his refusal to be swayed by local politics. He sat behind a table that served as his bench, his weathered face impassive as he called for order. "This is not a criminal trial," he stated clearly. "No one can be prosecuted for events 3 years past, but the truth can be heard and the record can be set straight." Luke sat in the front row between Anna and Taza. acutely aware of the hostile stares burning into his back. Captain Harris was there, arm in a sling, his face dark with fury. Mayor Thornton sat with the town council, their expressions ranging from discomfort to outright hostility. Father Miguel had done his work well. Journalists from San Francisco, Denver, and even one from back east filled a whole row, pencils ready. Federal Marshal James Crawford stood at the back, his presence a warning against any violence. "Mr. Morgan," Judge Blackwood began, "you may present your witness." Luke stood, his legs unsteady. The last time he'd spoken publicly about that night, he'd been lying to himself as much as everyone else. Now, truth felt like walking naked through thorns. "Your Honor, I was part of the civilian militia that attacked the Apache camp at Skeleton Wash 3 years ago. We were told we were pursuing horse thieves and murderers. That information was false." A murmur ran through the crowd. Thornton half rose. "This is outrageous. You'll have your turn, Mayor," the judge said coolly. "Continue, Mr. Morgan." Luke described the night in detail, the confusion, the gunfire, the moment he realized they were shooting at women and children. His voice broke when he spoke of Sarah. "My wife had followed us, trying to stop what she saw happening. In the chaos, in the dark," he stopped, gathered himself. "I shot her. My own bullet killed her and our unborn child." The barn erupted. Shouts of sympathy mixed with calls of "Apache lover" and worse. Judge Blackwood banged his gavel, a hammer borrowed from the local blacksmith, until order was restored. "Mr. Taza," the judge said, "your testimony." Taza rose with dignity despite the chains Marshal Crawford had insisted on for safety. His English, though accented, was clear and devastating. "My family was camped at Skeleton Wash because my wife was too heavy with child to travel further. We had papers from the agency permitting us to hunt off the reservation. We had done nothing wrong." He named the dead: his wife, Ayanna, his sister, his brother-in-law, 2 cousins, an elder uncle. Each name fell into the silence like a stone into still water. The soldiers and townsmen came at dawn. We had no warning. Some of us fought back. What else could we do? But most ran. They shot us as we ran. "Lies," someone shouted from the crowd. "Murdering savages got what they deserved." Marshal Crawford moved toward the voice, hand on his gun. The shouting stopped. Father Miguel presented the documents next: military reports, conflicting intelligence, orders to suppress details that might inflame Apache sympathizers. The journalists scribbled furiously as each damning page was read into the record. Captain Harris was called to respond. He stood stiffly, his good hand clenched at his side. "Whatever papers you have, the fact remains that Apaches had been raiding. Settlers were dying. We acted on the best information available." "Even if that information was wrong?" Judge Blackwood asked. "In war, mistakes happen. Good men make hard choices." Harris looked directly at Luke. "Some men understand duty. Others betray their own kind for sentiment. Is killing pregnant women duty, Captain?" Anna's voice rang out clear and sharp. She hadn't planned to speak, but the words came anyway. "Is orphaning children duty? Or is duty what Luke's doing now, telling the truth no matter the cost? You weren't there. Woman, you don't understand. I understand losing a husband. I understand raising a fatherless child." Anna stood, trembling but resolute. "But I also understand the difference between justice and vengeance. You seem to have forgotten." The crowd stirred uneasily. Some women nodded agreement, others looked away. The divide in the room was palpable. Those beginning to question old certainties, and those clinging to them harder. Mayor Thornton took his turn, defending the town's actions, speaking of frontier justice and the need for civilized people to defend themselves. But his words rang hollow after the testimony and documents. As the sun reached its zenith, heating the barn like an oven, Judge Blackwood called a recess. People spilled outside, clustering in groups, arguing in low, fierce voices. Luke found himself face to face with men he'd known for years. Jake Morrison from the general store spat at his feet. "Traitor, your wife would be ashamed." My wife would be alive if we'd listened to truth instead of fear, Luke replied quietly. A fist flew. Luke sidestepped, but others pressed close. Then Taza was there, still in chains but imposing, and Marshal Crawford's voice cut through. Enough! Any man throws another punch goes to jail. The crowd backed off, but their eyes promised this wasn't over. When court resumed, more witnesses spoke. An old Apache woman, brought by Father Miguel, told of finding the bodies, of trying to save Ayana's baby but being too late. A former soldier, discharged for drunkenness but sober now, admitted he'd falsified reports on Harris's orders. As shadows lengthened, Judge Blackwood finally spoke. This court has no power to punish crimes 3 years old, but I can and will make recommendations. Captain Harris, I'll be forwarding these findings to your superiors, suggesting a full military investigation. Mayor Thornton, the territorial governor will receive my report on Mercy's Bend's actions. He looked out at the crowd, his gaze stern but not without compassion. What happened at Skeleton Wash was a tragedy born of fear, prejudice, and failed leadership. Innocent people died, Apache and white alike. That cannot be undone, but perhaps, if we're willing to face hard truths, it need not be repeated. He stood. This hearing is concluded. The barn erupted again, but Luke was already moving. Anna's hand in his, Taza close behind. They pushed through the crowd, ignoring curses and a few thrown objects, making for the horses. It's done, Luke said as they rode away. Not justice, maybe, but truth, Taza finished. Sometimes that's all we can ask. They camped that night far from any town, under stars that seemed cleaner somehow. Anna tended a cut on Luke's cheek from the morning scuffle while Taza built up the fire. What you did today, Taza said suddenly, speaking my family's names in that place. To those people, I won't forget. Luke met his eyes across the fire. Nor will I forget what you've taught me, that surviving isn't living, that truth matters more than comfort. We're all teachers here, Anna added, and students. She looked between the two men who'd found brotherhood in the strangest circumstances. The question now is what we do with what we've learned. They talked late into the night, planning. California still called. A new start. A place where their strange family might find acceptance. But first, they'd return to Fort Benton for Samuel, then take their time traveling, letting the dust settle behind them. There'll be consequences, Luke warned. Harris won't forget, neither will the town. Let them come, Taza said with a warrior's calm. We've faced worse than angry men. As the fire died to embers, Anna began to sing softly, a lullaby she used for Samuel, but tonight it was for all of them. Her voice rose pure and clear in the desert air, singing of rivers and mountains and homes yet to be found. Luke lay back, looking at the stars, Sarah's memory finally at peace in his heart. Somewhere she was smiling. He thought, at this unlikely family forged from loss and found in truth. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in 3 years, that felt like promise instead of threat. Tomorrow would bring its challenges. But tonight, under the vast western sky, 3 wounded souls had found something worth more than gold or land or even justice. They'd found the courage to live again, and to live together, bound not by blood but by something stronger, the choice to face truth, to offer grace, and to build something new from the ashes of all they'd lost. The weeks after the hearing were lean and hard. Luke found work where he could, breaking horses, mending fences, anything that would put food on the table. No one in Mercy's Bend would hire him now, but word of a man who could gentle the wildest Mustang spread to outlying ranches where his past mattered less than his skill. Anna took in washing and mending at their small rented house outside Fort Benton. Samuel helped, his small hands learning to fold and sort, his bright chatter filling the quiet spaces. Taza disappeared for days at a time, returning with game or odd jobs from folks who needed tracking done and didn't care about the color of the tracker's skin. It was a Sunday afternoon, the autumn sun painting everything gold. When Luke stood at the top of the cemetery hill, He'd carved a new marker for Sarah from pine, taking his time with each letter. Not just her name and dates this time, but words that mattered. Beloved wife, seeker of truth, her courage lives on. Anna stood beside him, Samuel's hand in hers. Taza waited a respectful distance back, understanding this was a private moment made public. I need to do this, Luke said, kneeling to place the marker. To say goodbye properly, to tell her. His voice caught. Tell her, Anna said softly. Luke pressed his palm to the earth. Sarah, I found my way back. Not the way either of us expected, but maybe the way it needed to be. You always said truth would set us free. You were right, as usual. He smiled through tears. I'm going to try to live now, really live, for both of us. He stood, brushing dirt from his knees. Anna took his arm, and together they walked back down the hill. At the bottom, Samuel broke free and ran to Luke, who swept him up easily. Are we going to plant now, Mr. Luke? That's right, partner. Time to put those seeds in the ground. The land Luke had found was 40 acres of scrub and promise, bought cheap from a widow heading back east. It wasn't much, a falling-down cabin, a creek that ran dry in summer, soil that would need coaxing to produce. But it was theirs. They worked through the afternoon, all 4 of them. Luke and Taza cleared rocks while Anna and Samuel marked rows for the kitchen garden. The work was hard but good, the kind that built something instead of tearing down. As the sun lowered, they gathered at the cabin's salvage table. Anna had made stew from the rabbit Taza brought, flavored with wild herbs she'd gathered. They ate in comfortable silence, tired in the way that satisfied. I've been thinking, Taza said finally. This land, it's good to work it, to build, but I'm not a farmer. Luke's heart sank. He'd known this might come, but there are others like me. Taza continued. Caught between worlds, no place fitting right. I thought maybe. He paused, choosing words carefully. Maybe I could bring them here sometimes. Teach them what you've taught me, that enemies can become brothers, that there's another way forward. Anna reached across the table to grasp Taza's hand. This will always be your home, however you need it to be. Taza's stoic face cracked slightly, revealing the emotion beneath. You honor me. Later, as stars emerged in the darkening sky, Luke and Anna sat on the cabin's rickety porch. Samuel had fallen asleep against Taza, who told him stories of Coyote and the stars. The Apache warrior looked more at peace than Luke had ever seen him. No regrets? Anna asked, echoing her question from months ago. Luke pulled her close. None. You? Only that it took so long to find this. She tilted her face up to his. To find you. Their kiss was gentle, speaking of tomorrows stretching endless as the prairie. When they parted, Luke saw she was crying. What is it? I'm happy, she said, laughing at herself. So happy it frightens me. I keep waiting for something to take it away. Nothing's taking this away. Luke promised. We've paid for this peace, all of us. A sound made them turn. Riders approaching, 3 of them, moving slow and cautious. Luke's hand found his gun, old habits dying hard, but as they came into the lamplight from the window, he relaxed. It was the Wheelers from the mission, along with a young man Luke didn't recognize. Evening, folks. Paul Wheeler called. Sorry to come so late. This is Thomas Brennan, journalist from Chicago. He's been following the story, wants to write something bigger. Brennan was earnest and young, barely older than Samuel. Mr. Morgan, Mr. Taza, your story, it's important. People need to know that reconciliation is possible, that we can choose a different path than violence. Luke exchanged glances with Taza. They'd had their fill of attention, of being symbols instead of men. We're just trying to live, Luke said carefully. Nothing more. That's exactly the point. Brennan insisted. You're living proof that the cycle can be broken, that Apache and White can work together, build together. It's a story of hope. Hope, Taza repeated thoughtfully. Yes, but also warning. This peace, it was bought with blood and truth. Not everyone willing to pay such prices. They talked until late, Brennan taking notes, asking thoughtful questions. When he finally left with the Wheelers, Luke felt drained but oddly lighter. "Think any good will come of it?" Anna asked. "Maybe, maybe not." Luke stood, stretching. "But if one person reads it and chooses understanding over hate..." He shrugged. "Sarah would say that's worth something." As winter approached, their strange family settled into rhythms. Luke and Taza built a larger cabin, teaching Samuel as they worked. Anna planted herbs that would winter over, planning for spring. Neighbors, initially suspicious, gradually warmed to them, especially after Luke helped bring in the Hartley family's hay when Mr. Hartley broke his leg, asking nothing in return. Some nights, other Apaches would appear at their fire, young men lost between reservation life and a white world that didn't want them. Taza would talk to them in their language, while Luke showed them horse training, and Anna fed them until they looked less hollow. Not all stayed, but some did, learning that there were ways to be strong that didn't require violence. One evening, as the first snow began to fall, Luke found himself standing where he'd planned to put the barn come spring. The land stretched out before him, no longer empty but full of possibility. Anna came up beside him, and he wrapped his arm around her. "I love you," he said simply. It was easier now. These words that had once seemed impossible. "I know," she replied, smiling. "I love you too." Samuel's laughter rang out from the cabin where Taza was teaching him string games. The sound was pure joy, unmarked by the sorrows that had brought them all together. Luke thought of Sarah, resting now beneath Montana earth. He thought of Ayanna and her unborn child, of all the ghosts that had haunted them. They were still there, always would be, but they were peaceful now, part of the story instead of its ending. "What are you thinking?" Anna asked. "That we're home," Luke said. "All of us. We're finally home." She rose on her toes to kiss him as the snow fell harder, blanketing the world in white behind them. Warm light spilled from the cabin windows, and the sound of family filled the night. It wasn't the life any of them had planned, but it was the life they'd built from ashes and hope and the stubborn belief that people could change, could choose love over hate, forgiveness over vengeance. Tomorrow there would be more work. The cabin needed thinking. Animals needed tending. Spring would demand planting. There would be challenges too. Not everyone approved of their choices, and some never would. But tonight, as snow transformed the harsh landscape into something soft and new, they were simply four souls who'd found each other across impossible divides. Luke took Anna's hand and led her back to the cabin, back to warmth and light and the laughter of their son. Yes, Samuel was their son now, just as Taza was their brother, just as this land was their future. Family wasn't always about blood. Sometimes it was about choosing to stay, choosing to build, choosing to begin again no matter how many times you'd been broken. The snow continued to fall, covering the scars of the past, preparing the earth for new growth come spring. And in a small cabin on the Montana frontier, an unlikely family gathered close, grateful for second chances and the courage to take them, knowing that the greatest adventure wasn't in the wild lands they'd tamed, but in the wilder territory of learning to trust, to forgive, and to love again. Thank you for listening to this tale from the Old West. If you're hearing this story, drop a comment and let us know where you're tuning in from. We'd love to connect with fellow frontier story enthusiasts. Don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Campfire for more tales of courage, redemption, and love against all odds. Share your thoughts about Luke, Anna, and Taza's journey in the comments below. Until next time, partners.